Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime with Kevin, where we add value to people's lives, happening every day at 12 on eBoost Radio. As always, marketing and communications expert Craig Pagely. Hello, Craig. How are you doing?
Hello, Kevin. I'm well, thanks. Yeah, I hope you had a good little public long weekend.
It wasn't as long, or it didn't seem as long in my head as it did in reality. It felt like I could have done with a couple of days. I know you've also been literally working around the clock.
Yeah, I experienced the same. It really hasn't been any rest for me, and I just wish I can jump on a boat on an island somewhere and have a bit of chill time, because these long hours and extended work days are quite challenging at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Craig, so last week we covered the important topic of green economy, the green economy, and what this means and what that means for brands and marketers. So before we reveal what we are going to actually be chatting about today, don't you want to give us a quick summary of what that conversation was like?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. It was quite an enjoyable conversation, and I thoroughly enjoyed getting under the skin of some of it with some of the research that I did, because it's an incredibly important conversation.
Yeah.
And especially considering the negative impact that mass production has on our environment and world today. So, while the topic is rather broad, we did manage to pick up on a few key points that I want to reiterate and share with our listeners, and particularly for listeners who are thinking of developing a sustainable brand strategy, and what are the things to emphasize in that development. So the takeaway points that I'd like to share from our closing statements last week are covering a few of the do's and don'ts when developing that brand strategy. And these are referenced quite nicely in the ecomatcher.com website. So let's go. The points are as follows. Do integrate sustainability with your brand. So if you're serious about marketing your brand sustainable rather than having it as a value add-on, then environmentally sustainable work practices are required to permeate throughout your business and your culture. So you can't just stick a sticker on it and say, this is what we're doing. You've got to demonstrate culturally and through process and systems. And the really cool way to do that is a purpose-driven mission statement that will help define what that positioning is. Do educate, but remember there's also only so much marketing and self-promotion that your audience can take. So ensure you use a clear voice and mix good educational information that you want to share about your sustainability programs and initiatives with other brand messages, and get a nice balance. You can't just bombard purely around sustainability, because you also lose a bit of credibility around that as well. Do make your own targets. Often, a lot of companies follow other businesses on their path to sustainability, particularly because it's such an unknown and undefined area for a lot of businesses. And it's important that organizations focus on creating and meeting their own development goals. So those organizations definitely map out what works effectively for their brands, and don't just be a follower trying to replicate what looks like a successful strategy from another brand. Do pick the right partners. So while you may be certain that your company has some kind of sustainable positioning and good environmental practices in place, you can undermine all of your hard work by picking partners who are not necessarily sustainable. So, as we understand in South Africa with the BBE scorecard, there are certain levels where organizations need to achieve minimum thresholds, and the higher the level, the more attractive you become as a supplier. I think the very same principle actually applies in this particular instance. So when organizations are really working to achieve the maximum value and demonstrate that, I think that they can become really good partners for other businesses.
Yeah.
Do not greenwash. Do not oversell your green initiatives, and do not create a false narrative around them. Do not undersell. Celebrate your sustainable practices and achievements with your customers. And it's better to appear as a green advocate than it is as a brand that does not care about sustainability at all. So, whilst don't undersell, just make sure you are doing something. Do not alienate your customers. So involve your customers in your green initiatives. And if you have a sustainable model to dispose of certain types of waste, then invite your customers to partake by bringing some of their waste into the equation, and they feel this connection and belonging to that particular brand. And finally, do not go into debt. And this is an important one because sustainable journeys are things that need to be addressed very thoroughly with the right strategy and slowly with simple steps. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about sustainability of the planet, it's sustainability of your business as well. And when you dive in head first, well, you might not even have a business. So I think one of the other great things that we learned last week, Kevin, is that businesses that focus on the ESG fundamentals, those being environmental, social, and governance, have all accelerated their ROI significantly, and they definitely stand to gain more as many more consumers are becoming increasingly decisive in choosing and aligning with a brand based on its stand versus another brand that really doesn't have any stand in respect of doing good for the planet or doing good for mankind.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. As mentioned, I think I mentioned it last week as well, just to simply have this conversation. I think it's such an important conversation to have. One of the things that we're going to be chatting about today as well, bring that awareness around what brands could possibly do, but also how to do it better, and what to start paying attention to.
Yeah.
And I think the more we have these conversations, the more, people are becoming aware and people are actually starting to pay attention. But now, with that said, what are we going to be sharing today, Craig?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. So I mentioned last week that I wanted to continue this discussion of the green economy and sustainability into something more focused and relevant to us as consumers. So we're going to talk about how brands are informing consumers that they are making a concerted effort to be more green and more environmentally conscious in the manufacture of their products and services. And most importantly, a key thing here is in the production of their packaging, because that really is a big area of focus. So yeah, you did touch on this point well, Kevin, when you referenced the number of eco labels that you came across when we spoke last week, the likes of the Fair Trade Organization labels and the coffee packaging, the likes of the ever contentious Dolphin Safe labels and some of the tuna can packaging, and the Coffee and Farmers Equity label that's evident on a lot of the Starbucks coffee shop products that you indulge in.
Yeah, and on that point, Craig, I watched Seaspiracy. You recommended I watch Seaspiracy on Netflix, and watched it this past weekend, and noted the controversial section on Dolphin Safe tuna, and how these labels incorrectly reference so-called good fishing practice, and actually hide that what's really happening in the sea, in the oceans.
Yeah, gosh, I'm glad you watched the documentary, Kevin, because it's something that I think every single consumer needs to watch and really understand what is happening on the back end of any production process. So yeah, and good that you referenced it at this point. Thanks, because one of the key things that it addresses is the integrity of the labels and whether consumers really know what is going on, whether it's a fully fledged label or a little flash on a label. The integrity, the message behind those labels is quite critical. So I thought, let me set some time to put this into context and talk around this notion of green or eco labeling, Kevin.
Yeah.
So to start off with, green or eco labeling is most importantly an identifier of some of the steps that a particular brand in question has taken in contributing to the green economy that we spoke about last week. Referencing Springer Link, an interesting online collection of peer-reviewed journals and books, or at least book series, they cover a range of topics in the science, social science, and humanities space. And we read that green labeling generally refers to the accreditation activities of products in line with the specific environmental standards of authority that green labels are known as. And for me, that's really great that there is a body that's starting to cover a lot of rich content on this, because accreditation is a vitally important part of this. But understanding the production lines in organizations is another equally important part, and what they're actually doing within the contribution to society and the planet as a whole. So to add some credence to that, and this is a bit that I quite appreciated, is the International Organization for Standardization, which is more commonly known as ISO, And we're all familiar with ISO 9001, ISO this, that, and the next thing across various practices of production and or technology.
Yeah.
And the ISO definition on green labels is that it's seen as symbols printed on products on their packaging to advertise environmental quality or characteristics. So while we all look at to the ISO standards as the benchmark of compliance, we clearly learned from the Seaspiracy documentary that no such compliance was achieved in many of those best fishing practices, and particularly the hidden agendas and falsities that came from the Earth Island Institute, which is the owner and issuer of the dolphin-free logo on packaging. They completely fabricated the guarantee that there was no dolphin meat in the various canned tuna brands carrying those logos, and they were quite devious in entertaining interviews with the journalists from the documentary.
Yeah.
But what the documentary clearly highlights is the very fact that there's a large-scale exploitation around the use of logos, and particularly in this instance, the dolphin-free logo. And manufacturers often have to pay high fees to be allowed to certify their products as being compliant with whatever those causes or promises the logos represent. And the sad reality there is no guarantee that there is dolphin-free meat in any of the tuna cans that we see on the shelves.
Sure.
Yeah.
It makes me think, Craig, just to add to this conversation is, you started off with saying there's a certain amount of integrity that needs to be considered, right? And I think I even look at the industry that I specifically work in. Very often integrity just flies out the window, right? People coin stuff and register stuff and put brands out there, and until you really do a bit of investigation and consideration, you really have to know if you're dealing with someone of integrity or a brand of integrity. And I think it's people have to start paying attention to it far more.
Such a great point. That it really is, Kevin. And I think that plays quite nicely into the next point that I want to make, is that it's an incredibly double-edged sword that we're playing with, because many of the brands, as I mentioned, pay substantial fees to actually legitimately carry these labels, and obviously they hope to sell more products on the back of their visible and genuine commitment to these good business practices, while others just pay the lip service. And they're prepared to pay their way in lying to gain the attention of consumers, and they don't really have any intent to ensure that their procedures and policies or processes have the validation that these particular endorsements come with. And they're just paying their way to win over consumers. And as you said, there's many consumers who actually don't really understand what these labels represent or actually care what's happening in the background. If one really had a look at the percentage of the world population that understand and care for sustainability, environmental aspects, and doing good to the planet, I think it's a fragment. We will be in the lower percentages. So brands know that, these greedy corporate behemoths know that, and they just exploit it. But to close off on that point, I think it's also important to know that consumers are willing to pay more for products that are environmentally friendly or sustainable. And if deceitful brands can leverage this position, as I just said, then obviously they're going to sell more and therefore make more money. And as we know, at the end of the day, it's really greed that makes the world go round, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, and it just brings me to the idea that I've just recently needed to register as a certified coach with the International Coaching Registrar, and purely based on the fact that the work that you essentially do carries weight to a large degree. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with people's lives, people's money, and there has to be some kind of credibility, right? And so you have to I had to go to the degree of proving that these are my clients and these are the people I work with, and there has to be some kind of legitimacy that we bring to the table, right? And I mean, and that's the next question that I have here, Craig, is what should consumers be looking out for, and how do we know that the brands containing these labels are actually legitimate? Because I think a lot of people we get used to that. Oh yeah, I've seen that label before. It obviously means, you know, that it is legitimate, but that's not necessarily the case. Like, what are we looking for?
That's a great point you make, and a nice segue into the question you asked there, because at the end of the day, you're right. Your business and the continuity of your business is dependent on referrals, word of mouth, validation of the impact that you make on the organizations and people that you work with. So, you know, for you to be able to put a label and an endorsement or third-party certification on your website, it's incredibly important to achieve those levels of excellence. And the reality is the work that you do is entirely visible, and those entities and authorities can actually benchmark you very, very easily and high levels of scrutiny. But when you're sitting with mass production on the back end, it's easy to hide behind a lot of it. So the great thing is, though, Kevin, there is a standardization of eco labels around the world, and I really enjoyed finding this content to share with you, because standardization is vitally important. We need some kind of point of reference to educate ourselves with, and there's an interesting site called The Big Room. It's a business that operates the .eco domain, and for many who don't know, you know, .eco domain is the new web address ending for organizations, businesses, and people that are committed to positive change for the planet. And it's quite a wonderful statement to give your brand a .eco URL, because it really is. It's another one of those signatures of putting it out there that this is what you're committed to. Yeah. So established in 2007, Big Room's mission is to make it easier to make green choices. And quoting from their website, the Eco Label Index advisory services help clients deliver on sustainability promises by working with them to navigate the complex and diverse international eco-label landscape, to create and monitor green purchasing programs, and to understand and meet the needs of stakeholders. Yeah. So the Eco-Label Index is the largest global directory of eco-labels, Kevin, and it currently tracks more than 455 eco-labels in 199 countries and across 25 industry sectors. And, you know, obviously in those 455 labels, there'll be duplicity of many of those labels across all 199 countries. But what's really great to see is that there's 61 eco labels listed for use in South Africa. So, yeah, a lot of the international companies plus local companies are really taking a stand and representing their intent and belief and initiatives to remain green and sustainable. So clients listing with the Eco Label Index gain access to that extensive global network of sustainable organizations, and obviously the many experts that reside within those organizations to help them in their quest to become compliant and effectively environmentally sustainable. So I reviewed a number of the labels. I literally trawled through the list of 455 and was quite impressed at the intent behind many of the initiatives listed, Kevin. And to give a sense of this, I thought we could share a few of the listeners. So I decided to go for the very first two that were listed and the very last two that were listed. So let me give you a sense, you and the listeners, a sense of what these are. So the first association listed in the Eco Label Index is a business called 4C Association. They're a multi-stakeholder organization that brings together actors that are committed to addressing the sustainability issues of the coffee sector in a pre-competitive manner. The members of the 4C Association include coffee farmers, both big and small, traders, importers and exporters, industry players, being the coffee roasters and retailers, and civil society, which are the non-governmental organizations. The second cause that was listed there is the original premise, is 80 plus, sorry. And the original premise of the 80 plus program, this I find incredibly interesting, was to enlist utilities and computer manufacturers to participate in innovative upstream by down programs to integrate more energy efficient power supplies to desktop computers. The program has now evolved into the Eco Plug Load Solution Program, which promotes a broad array of highly effective, efficient commercial and retail technologies. And it's really great to see the computer aspect come up again, because we spoke about Google last week, obviously, where they were looking to run the cloud-based service off alternate energy generated power sources, which was really great. Yeah. So the last two listed labels are defined as follows. Second last is WSDA Organic. This entity protects consumers and supports the organic food industry by ensuring the integrity of organic food products through establishing organic standards and certifying organic producers, processors, and handlers. The program provides technical information about organic food production and assists in the development of markets for the organic food industry. And the last label that was referenced in the Eco Label Index was ZQ Fiber. ZQ Fiber combines natural performance wool with an accreditation program that ensures environmental, social, and economic stability, animal welfare, and traceability back to source. Now, what's really interesting around those four as well, Kevin, is apart from the intent of establishing new predefined standards in production value chains for organizations and monitoring claims around environmentally friendly products and understanding and really trying to understand what influence these claims have on consumer behavior, all of these organizations and entities are actually directly impacting on the entire value chain of that particular sector that they represent. And as you see, it talks about growing, it talks about the planting, it talks about the farming, it talks about the production behind it, it talks about the packaging. So the entire value chain in each of these sectors is evaluated against its steps and contribution to a sustainable economy and sustainable planet.
That's amazing, Craig. I think I think a lot of people don't know this, and I think it's really something for people to go and check out and Google all these brands to find out more about it, right? So more and more products are starting to carry out different logos, so which in many instances are actually quite confusing as to what the logo or icon actually represents. So how do we know what's actually being said or done by the brands in question?
Okay. Yeah, so Kevin, just to pick up on the point you made around folk maybe just going to Google some of this, I think anybody wanting to really get their head into some of these initiatives, Eco Label Index is a phenomenal starting point to really get a good sense of what the various initiatives stand for. Yeah. And actually, it also, they'll get a sense of what's been done by these initiatives and therefore potentially the brands in question in this regard. But to try and decipher what these logos represent, I genuinely believe a much greater effort is required from brands in the development of a broad and far-reaching educational campaign so that consumers can be made more aware of each of the labels and logos that they see on a daily basis. And generally it is on a daily basis. I got a bottle of mineral water in front of me and I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 labels just as I look at it now. So yeah. So what I did as well, Kevin, I said, so if we looked at just 2 areas of the industry that require logos to be represented on their packaging, you'll very quickly see that product packaging and labels will very soon be giving up a lot of their key brand space to an array of these eco-environmentally friendly logos. And key brand space for me in this instance represents the logo, related design elements on the pack, product descriptors, product variants, nutrient information, ingredients listings, instructions for use, etc. So, there's a lot of information that goes into a label and really getting the design aesthetic and nuances right is vitally important for products stand out. But now you start filling it with all of these other icons that represent aspects of environmentally friendly and good green business is really a big challenge. So just looking at the generic packaging icons and the environmental responsible sourcing icons, we can see that there's potentially up to 22 icons that could be considered for inclusion on packaging and label designs in that particular space. Obviously, there are only a few that are required per product, But, that in itself could be 4, 5, or 6. And as I say, on the bottle of water that I have in front of me, there's 4 in place. So looking at the generic packaging icons that we come across daily, I'll just run through the names, and I'm sure a lot of them will jump out at you. So you got the recyclable, you got non-recyclable, you got from the made from recyclable content, you got PET1, you got HDPE2, you got PVC3, you got LDPE4, PP5, PS6, paper, glass, aluminium, biodegradable, compostable, rinse and recycle, and flatten and recycle. So there's a host there.
Yeah, there's a lot that I've that you mentioned that I've actually seen, but if you consider 22 eventually, it's taking up a whole bottle.
Yeah. But as I say, fortunately, we won't need all 22 because they clearly represent different things. So let's look at, for instance, just the PET1 icon, PETE. We learned that the number 1 inside the triangulation indicates that this is plastic, and that's a polyethylene terephthalate, and that in itself is shortened to PET or PETE. And this symbol is generally found in bottles of soft drinks, water, salad dressing, our peanut butter jars, and vegetable oil containers. And most definitely, I have the little triangulation here as well. But it's also important for listeners to know that there's a full range of recycling symbols on plastic alone, Kevin, numbering up to 7. So from 1 to 7 in the center of those 3 little angle arrows in the triangulation shape, all represent different types and kinds of plastic and how recyclable it is. The interesting one to look out for those is the PS6 reference, because that is polystyrene, and it's a bit of a taboo to have anything with a PS6 on it because polystyrene is incredibly difficult to recycle. And interestingly, it's banned from a number of municipalities in the USA, and I see more and more of it in the dump sites around South Africa, where it's sort of put to one side because it's definitely not well received as a high energy effort, almost non-biodegradable product.
Yeah.
So I then went on to look at some of the environmental and responsible sourcing icons that we come across daily. A lot less in the spectrum, but also quite a mouthful. So you've got the FSC, the MSC, SASSI, Fair Trade, locally produced, locally sourced, and product of South Africa. So again, just looking at one of them, I thought let's look at the FSC, which stands for the Forest Stewardship Council, which is an international non-profit organization that's dedicated to promoting responsible forestry, which is really great. The FSC certifies forests all over the world to ensure that they meet the highest environmental and social standards, and that they work to help forests protect animal habitats, indigenous people, not necessarily being that successful in the Amazon, the poor folk, workers' rights, and areas of significant environmental or cultural importance. And they're forests that are troves of treasure for animal habitats and other nutrients and plants and things like that. And they most definitely need careful consideration and looking after by the FSC. So the FSC also sets the standards for responsible forest management. And what's great about that is, we can see, for instance, fibers from certified forests attract all the way from farming, planting, storage, right the way through to the actual manufacture of the product. And they call that the FSC chain of custody system. So you'll be able to track where fiber from a particular tree in a particular country at a particular time and point in time, I should say, finds its way to a product that has been manufactured with that particular fiber in it as well. So products sold with the FSC label helps businesses and consumers make informed choices about forest products that they buy. And as we mentioned previously, any of these representations definitely can make a positive change to keep our forests for all forever. So the FSC recycled label primarily recognizes the importance of recycling paper and timber, and every ream of paper in a photostat machine has an FSC logo on it, and it'll tell you about what the recycle quality and content is there. And it definitely helps in protecting the world's forests. And unlike general recycled claims, which require no verification, the FSC recycle label provides assurance that all of the wood or paper in that product has been verified as genuinely recycled, which is a phenomenal statement. And reclaimed materials can also be used in products carrying the FSC mix label. However, only products containing 100% recycled material can carry the FSC recycled label. So even within the construct of the FSC label, there is a range. Only the top end can get the 100% recycled validation. The mix gets the mix label, and you just have to work through on that basis.
You realize that with you mentioning the FSC like this, and what's the other one, the P6 that you mentioned, PS6?
PT6, PS6, sorry, yes, the PS6.
Yeah, like every time I see a PS6, I'm going to completely avoid even purchasing this. So that's a really good thing. And now, every time I buy anything, I'm specifically going to consider the FSC icon or that label. It's because knowing that it does what it does, that's quite substantial.
And Kevin, any Tetra Pak pack, whether it's your milk, juice, whatever it may be, any of the multi-layered food packaging products will all have that particular FSC mark on it. The challenge with the PS6, though, the polystyrene is, I don't think that the packaging companies are really honest enough around it, because if you're buying many products that are packaged and wrapped and are needing some kind of support within the boxes, there's half a ton of bloody polystyrene inside there. So you only get to experience it and see it when you've opened the pack, and I don't believe that they bring enough justice to the messaging on those kinds of packaging. So where do we find our FSC icons? You mentioned that you're going to look out for them. I'll tell you where to find them. So anything from toilet rolls, printed publications and magazines, good niche publications in the index section, your milk and juice cartons from Tetra Pak, and many other packaged food products. So as with any of these icons, Kevin, the inclusion on packaging reassures consumers that the products that they're buying are definitely made from responsible sources, and that these sources have all been verified to meet the FSC's strict environmental and social standards. So maybe a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but definitely what's obvious here, Kevin, is that brands and environmentally conscious bodies have evolved substantially in developing these range of icons, and these can definitely be used by consumers to make better, more effective purchase decisions between products that are environmentally friendly or not. And the closing point here is that I still believe that we need a really good, broad, strong, well-structured educational campaign to inform consumers on what all of these icons mean.
So Craig, is it easy for brands to implement a green marketing strategy that demonstrates their commitment to the various causes and initiatives that you've mentioned?
Sure. No. I don't think it's as easy as it sounds, because we've spoken about a lot of entities, we've spoken about a lot of bodies that are doing the back-end regulation and controls, and you'd think that with all of that in place and the established causes and entities being in place, no. I don't think it is at all. However, there definitely are a few key points that brands should be aware of when developing their green packaging and marketing strategies. And I was quite delighted that I came across a couple of really simple steps that were covered by Shopify on the Shopify website. And as you know, we've covered Shopify quite extensively in the e-commerce section, and I really do rate the brand and what it's trying to achieve in the e-com space. So it's good to see that platforms like Shopify are covering and carrying contents of this nature on green labels, on greenwashing, on green marketing, because thousands of brands, Kevin, are presented and sold via their white label e-commerce platforms. And it's really the perfect place for brands to be monitored and policed in respect of the claims that they make publicly. So yeah, good, a big up from me for Shopify. So the takeaway points here for anyone interested in the topic and as shared by Shopify as follows. Green marketing is the marketing of environmentally friendly products and services, and it is becoming more popular as more people become concerned with environmental issues and decide that they want to spend their money in ways that is kinder to the planet. So green marketing can involve a number of different things for marketers, such as creating eco-friendly products, using eco-friendly packaging, and adopting sustainable business practices, or focusing their marketing efforts on messages that communicate a product's green benefits. All of the points we've covered in detail earlier. This type of marketing can be more expensive, but it also can be profitable due to the increased demand. For example, products made locally in North America tend to be more expensive than those made overseas using cheaper labor, but they have a much smaller carbon footprint because they don't need to fly across the globe to get there. And for some consumers and business owners, the environmental benefits far outweigh the price difference.
Yeah.
The green marketing methods, so beyond making your environmentally friendly products, business owners can also do other things such as being part of a green marketing strategy. These are the key points, such as using eco-friendly paper and inks for printing. And Kevin, believe me, that's a real thing that I'm finding in the industry. The print manufacturers are also making sure that they're adhering to those particular practices. They could entirely skip printed materials and opt for purely electronic or digital marketing, a trend that we're seeing more and more these days as well. They could have a recycling program and responsible waste disposal practices. They could be using eco-friendly product packaging, using efficient packaging and shipping methods, using eco-friendly power sources, and taking steps to offset the environmental impact by making contributions into other policy areas. And then
Sorry, so just on that point, so green marketing methods, right? So I think, that speaks to such a profound way of actually doing your part, using eco-friendly sort of product packaging, but also having, sort of a disposable waste kind of option where people are actually paying attention to how they get rid of just random paper, or because I'm thinking big corporates, the big banks, and they've got thousands of people in office constantly using paper, or very often at least. Having a disposable recycling programs that's a quick, easy kind of way to be part of taking action, right?
Absolutely. And Kevin, brands could associate with organizations and actually use those organizations as touch points for the collection of the elements of recycling beyond just paper. Let's have a look at a battery brand, for instance. Batteries are really difficult to dispose of and recycle. A battery brand could come into an office park, a office park, set up key touch points. Everybody's got batteries in torches, in remotes, in a myriad of products. That's just one way that a manufacturing product brand can associate with an area and a community by making it easy for people to dispose of their unwanted and used products, most definitely. So the reality here is that, take it a step further, we actually need to be doing this at home as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just up to brands and organizations. It is, what are you doing as an individual at home, and what are you doing to be conscious around the waste pickers as well. So it's not just about organizations really applying some good green marketing methods. It's about every man at home that has a dustbin that you throwing in cardboard, plastic, paper, tin cans, glass, and waste food. How are you separating that? What are you doing with it, and how are you feeding that into the recycling process as well? That's something that really needs to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then, Kevin, the good old topic of greenwashing, it's something that comes up time and time again. And as we know, marketers try and capitalize on the growing number of green consumers by simply taking a green marketing approach to products that actually might not otherwise be considered green. And that in its truest form is greenwashing. So they try and position their products as better choice for the environment when they're actually really not. An example of this is when a company uses subliminally as it may be, the color green in the packaging or the word green somewhere in the messaging, when actually there isn't anything particularly eco-friendly about that particular product at all. And the fact that it's not more eco-friendly than other competing products is in itself, an even bigger lie. So greenwashing is not only misleading, but it can also be damaging to a company's reputation. Yeah. If consumers are certain they indeed want to buy a green product, they should look for the official certification listed on the product packaging. And as I say, Kevin, they could even go a step further and really spend some time on the website and look at the eco-label index and get a sense of what the various logos mean, what the various initiatives are, and how true they are in delivering these kinds of programs and projects. And while the concept of eco-labeling is considered to be a good thing, it's interesting to note that in many instances, there's negative commentary around the application of the concept because it isn't as straightforward as many believe it is. And realistically or not, there's actually no empirical evidence that eco-labeling is benefiting the environment. So brands may be doing their own individual studies around their production value chains and their disposal processes and things like that. But as a collective, I don't think there are big enough studies that can clearly state that eco-labeling over a 10-year period has seen a X% move up in purchase and a Y% up moving in helping the economy, the green economy, and environmental issues. I think we're still a way off from having that hard-coded empirical evidence. Yeah. So in closing on that point, green marketing or green labeling clearly requires a well-defined green strategy, which in turn requires a set of effective marketing methods and activities. And as such, it's not a quick and simple solution, Kevin.
Yeah. Craig, so in closing today's discussion, what are the key points or tips that you can share with the listeners on the impact of labels in driving awareness of a brand's commitment to the green economy and the sustainability?
Yeah, Kevin, so there's a really great article on greenbiz.com, which is a blog, and they provide 5 simple communication tips to help marketers address the green economy and market their sustainable products better. So titled 5 Communication Tips to Market Sustainably, the article is written by Denise Delhoff, who's a senior consumer researcher and a member of the conference board. And the article covers the following tips for our listeners. Tip number 1, consider localizing your messaging. Sustainability does not mean the same thing to everyone. Great point that. Consumers around the world associate sustainability with different focus areas. So for instance, in North America, most associate sustainability with recycling, whereas in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, shoppers typically associate sustainability with fair pricing, whilst in Latin America, sustainability is associated with alternate sources of energy, and people in Asia associate sustainability with the environment. So you can clearly see that messaging construct will be fundamentally different for each of those regions and markets around the world, Kevin.
Yeah, it's amazing.
A really, really great point to start with.
Yeah.
Seek certification being the second. Yeah, shoppers often refrain from buying brands with better environmental practice due to lack of information and trust. And again, I'm just going to throw in the points around the likes of the eco-label index as a good starting point. So consumers often find it either this is a challenge. They find it too time consuming to do the research on the brands and truly understand them. They also don't necessarily trust companies' environmental claims, again, because of all the greenwashing that we speak about. And they often find the plethora of these icons and flashes highly confusing. So as we discovered in the eco-label index portion of our discussion, the third-party certification definitely is probably one of the most trustworthy intermediaries for vetting sustainability claims at this point. The third point is aim for transparency. So shoppers are increasingly interested in the supply chain transparency, including the materials used, production processes, and most importantly, working conditions. Not just about cheap labor, but also very much around gender and equity and fair representation. But they often lack sufficient information about these things. So The leading reason that consumers do not buy brands with fair labor practice claims is that consumers really don't know what it means and which brands are really being fair.
Yeah.
Considering the increasing discussion around the world about minimum wages and gender pay equity, fair labor practices may indeed become more important to consumers moving forward. So yeah, I agree with that. I think that is very much going to move up the rankings of importance, in the same way that, 9-year-old chained to a sewing machine in India making a really great brand of sneakers plays particularly into that point there.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Point 4, visualize and humanize. One way to make transparency feel real is to give your customers a visual peek behind the scenes of workers, of their environments, of business processes, and of a brand's sustainability practices. And research shows that giving customers a view behind the curtain has many benefits, and it most definitely can increase the consumer's trust and satisfaction, which ultimately leads to sales. And, we spoke about short form video a couple of shows again as the perfect opportunity here. And then, expanding on another conversation, getting some influencers to really lead the ride in that particular instance. So,
exactly.
Yeah. The final point here is communicate concrete benefits of sustainability. So help your consumers understand the positive impact of the sustainable products by connecting the benefits to their everyday lives. Nice point as well. For example, energy efficiency is best expressed in financial terms rather than energy savings, as people really understand the metrics of money better than scientific metrics. Another example notes that the German rail company Deutsche Bahn provides a valuable tool that quantifies carbon dioxide emissions and energy consumption and air pollutants of a specific train trip compared to the same trip by car or plane. Really, really great.
Yeah.
Companies can also express the benefits of sustainable packaging in concrete terms, such as the amount of plastic waste avoided or the number of trees saved. And another way to demonstrate the positive aspects is to showcase new products being made from recycled material, of which, again, we're starting to see much and much more of. So, yeah, brands adopting a good approach to marketing sustainability, these are the brands that will achieve more value from sustainability initiatives. And by leveraging their communication teams, these brands can really build trust with consumers through ongoing education and putting the right message in place and just showing commitment to sustainability efforts.
Fantastic, Craig. Thank you for that. It's so informative, and I think if you are a business person, if you're an executive out there, and you are someone who is part of a brand or a well-known brand, having this kind of conversation, bringing awareness to it, is really what we need, right? And I think it's fantastic that we have more insights like this. You formulated it so well for us to start like paying attention to it and asking the bigger questions, right?
Yes.
But before we go, Craig, because just the Seaspiracy documentary on Netflix. What was your kind of feeling that you experienced in that show?
Yeah, I was saddened in many instances because it's so easy to hide the devastation in the oceans.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the one thing that really jumped out at me. Whereas, you can obviously see what's happening with the deforestation of the Amazon. You can obviously see what's happening with the building of dams to dry up rivers downstream and impact on society's livelihood and things like that. Those are incredibly tangible experiences, and you can obviously see the waste that ends up floating in the ocean from our bad practice on land. But what happens below the ocean? There is so much that is just hidden. It's happening at night. It's happening in the darkest corners of the planet where it's hard to get to police and to monitor. And that is an absolute shocking treat for me. And I don't know how on earth we're going to get more policing opportunities and more ships out there and more stringent rules to really take control of these particular instances. And for me, again, apart from the likes of the batteries of farming fresh salmon in Scotland, obviously you saw the negativity around that is because farming practices have been established in the ocean that they haven't necessarily understood the net behavior and process in a moving river for salmon, and that hasn't been applied to what's happening in the ocean. So whilst there are a lot of businesses who are trying to move to other methods to do good and create more opportunity, obviously for us to eat and for profitability to put back in, there's some negativity there. But the outright slaughter of species of animals on the back of greed and not caring about the impact on the ecosystem running down the ocean from the surface of the ocean to the oxygenation of the ocean to the feeding a cycle of each one of those species right down to the ocean layer. That's for me shocking. And I do not know how long it's going to take for that to sink in and for mankind to take a stance against it. And the challenge for me here, Kevin, is, and I'm rambling on, is that how the hell do we get onto the ocean as a collective group of humans and make our voice heard? We can march, we can walk down the street, we can blockade roads, we can sit in and create the Arab Springs and things like that through physical ability and being able to do that. But to get into the ocean, we can't do it. And that's really a tough one for us, is how as mankind can we actually push back against these organizations in the place where they're doing it and stopping them. And, unfortunately, there are not enough Greenpeace ships and Greenpeace type individuals who are out there doing this for us. It costs a lot of money and it's a damn difficult challenge.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to the one thing that really shocked me completely. I think they called it scraping, when they scrape the ocean. Yes. From an aerial view, you can actually see the marks left behind from the nets that scrape through the ocean. And I was going, I can't even fathom that's even possible. Like that's like actually happening. Like we scarring the earth to that degree. Yeah. So I'm with you. Quite shocked and saddened. And it's really bringing like in its simplistic form, like right into this house, like where I am right now, kind of going, well, what am I doing about it? And what can I do? What more can I do?
Kevin, for me, the toughest thing is, how do we as society stand up against it? Yes, we can all go and not buy any fish anymore or any canned tuna or things like that, but we got to stop the root cause of where this is happening, and it's in those countries where the reporters went into undercover with fear of their life and things like that. That's where the stuff has to stop.
Absolutely. So, Craig, with that said, and guys, if you are listening to this, I would encourage you to go and watch it to bring more awareness and really some insight to big questions that we are posing here. But in light of that, Craig, where to from here in our next conversation?
Yeah, Kevin, I'd like to continue on this topic of product packaging, but I want to now start moving specifically into the food packaging trends, how manufacturers are using design to stand out on shelf, what messaging, icons, and warning labels are making their way onto the food packaging and labels, and how marketers and advertisers are actually advertising their products in this particular space. So, nice green economy into understanding sustainability, green marketing, etc. Now let's go into a bit more of a granular space of that actual product on shelf.
Absolutely fantastic, guys. If you want to join us, please check it out every Thursday, happening at 12 on ebizradio.com. And that's the marketing segment of the show. Craig, thank you for spending some time with us and giving us such beautiful insight. I'll chat to you next week, and thanks.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Kevin.
Cheers. Bye. All righty, Craig.